Hello, welcome. The first chapter of the book of Genesis in the Bible recounts the beginning of the world. This passage is commonly read from a historical point of view. It's seen as an initial reference point for the unfolding of time. I'd like to offer another point of view on the passage, not to say that other views are wrong or not valuable. I just want to relate it to our experience of ourselves, personally. We'll look at the first day of creation in this video. So let's briefly explore the creation of light and the implications there for identity, for time, and duality. Genesis 1, 3-5. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. The separation of light and dark unlock identity. The description of light and dark affords the possibility of the self and the other. Here and there, as distinct spaces are implied in light and dark. The area is dark, then the area is light. When God first speaks, the light enters the darkness. Initially, they're mixed. It is only after the light and dark are separated that they're named. They are not realizing their specific identities until they're bounded apart from one another. This process of separation creates the distinction between bodies that allows them to manifest their unique being. The existence of an identity means that something has been separated out and bounded apart from within the potential that it emerged out of. The fact that we experience ourselves as individual beings and that we recognize things in the world as distinct from one another is foundational to reality. This principle is expressed in the separation of light and dark. Regarding the phenomenon of subjective identity, so about the experience that we have of ourselves, there's a variation in the scale and degree of innate identification. So what we feel as being ourself can change. In normal personal experience, our environment is our context. Our body participates in our sense of self within that given space. In a sensory deprivation chamber, however, this is different because all of the environmental inputs are removed. So the boundaries between a person and their environment seem to dissolve. The mind then can retreat and reestablish the body itself as the environment. So without a perceptible division within a space, identity is not possible. As people, we naturally seek to preserve our identity. We can be confronted at times with absence of reference points that we normally use to tell the difference between ourselves and other things. But when we experience this, we then reflexively redefine that boundary. We maintain our sense of personalized agency even within our own body. We see a reciprocal shift in this process in the example of crowds. So the opposite, rather than contracting, the sense of identity expands. Within a mob, our identity grows into a mutually subsuming selfhood that we ride within. We can become one with a group and share a communal experience. Rather than a division of me and this place, or even the reduced me and my body, our identity expands into we and that. or sometimes we participate in the oppositional us and them. But regardless of the scope of our sense of self, there's still an essential distinction between us as content and our context, or between us and other content. The basic division within the world is inevitable. That unique identities manifest within creation is an axiom, a statement that cannot be argued without proving it right. A person cannot disagree with the existence of individuated beings without provoking the response, with whom am I in disagreement, or who is speaking? The sense of ourself as we identify it is like the light. The other that we reach towards is like the darkness, the known and the unknown. We cannot escape the phenomenon of binding identities and their passing that is described in the flow of darkness into light into darkness. The reality of identity makes perception and relationship possible. When there is something that sees, there is something being seen. Identity and perception both necessarily imply relationship. The seeing is the action that positions the one seeing relative to what is seen. When things are relative to one another, they are in relationship. The light and the dark are in relationship as night and day, when God sets them in order with respect to one another. Before the light and dark are separated, there is a single confused mass, without identity. When the confused elements are distinguished from one another and identified with their respective names, they are of course then in relationship regarding one another. And this relationship unfolds through time. So in illustrating the creation narrative, oftentimes light is shown adjacent to the dark, day beside night. The brilliance of illumination shares the same sky with the mystery of darkness in many drawings. In the actual narrative, however, light is present after the dark. It is described as a sequence. The light and the dark are demonstrating time and experienced within time as transitioning through evening and morning. We rest in the darkness and gather our potential in dreams until the day begins with light and presses us into concrete action. The border between light and dark is time. Interaction, relationship necessarily occurs through time. The basis of communication is turn-taking. Now this here, then that there. First this space, then that place. First I speak, then you speak. You can speak in the comments, for example. Comparison and contrast manifest as a cycle of focus and refocus on the distinct elements of a given system or environment. So going from one thing to another happens in steps. Dark, light, night, day, evening, morning. Listen, do. The metrics of relationship include space and time. If we describe a relationship, we might say how long it lasted, where it has occurred, what direction it has. The location, duration, and transformation are all described in the first day of creation. The identities named are acting in turn, covering and revealing, sheltering and exposing. Their action unfolds as a series of states. This unfolding is understood as time. So, identity causes relationship, which causes time, the first day. Light and dark as a basic duality may be understood as something like presence and absence, the real and the possible. They are like activity and rest. Electricity demonstrates this principle. So turn on a light, the circuit is active and alive, and brightness fills the room. At rest, the circuit is holding its potential, anticipating its resolution into some definite path. It waits at rest in darkness. This principle of binary, the I and the O symbolized on your device's power button, is present in our own nervous system. Whether or not a nerve is active determines whether we are sensing or acting. It's present at the root of computing in the basic binary language. Most of the power that we leverage through digital technology represents fundamentally the exchange between light and dark described in the first day of the Genesis creation narrative. Our software and our senses run because God let there be light. The possibility of thought and intent is rooted in this basic distinction. So in our own mind, the space in which a thought arises is like the darkness, and the thought itself is like the light which God spoke into a disordered mass at the head of creation. The relationship between presence and absence affords the possibility of form. Try to imagine a drawing without the presence or absence of lines or tones. Try to imagine a competitive race without the presence and absence of vehicles and barriers. The binary exchange of presence and absence, implied in the creation of light and dark, is not just for technology and thought. It is essential to the physical world itself. Where and what a thing is depends on where and what it is not. Without the creation and distinction of light and dark, existence is not possible. The narrative describes not just an event, but a principle at the root of our own experience. This principle lies at the root of everything holding its identity in place through time. Genesis 1:3-5. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. There was evening and there was morning, the first day. Within this brief description of sound becoming light, the words, "Let there be light," are themselves the light that unfolds reality within the darkness. The creation is the word. The revelation is the expression of God. The apocalypse is the birth of meaning. The beginning not only of existence itself, but of our own personal existence, is in identity, within time, receiving and projecting. There is no meaning without relationship, no relationship without identity. There is no identity without the light and dark of the first day. There's no existence whatsoever without the illuminating power of the Word of God, who is our salvation. Thank you very much for your attention. This is part of a series on the first 3 days of creation. If you found this informative or interesting at all, please be in relationship with me using the tools available. A comment or a click is appreciated.